Right, we're doing an absolute classic today. We are doing Warlock of Firetop Mountain versus Warlock of Firetop Mountain versus Warlock of Firetop Mountain from Fighting Fantasy Adventures. But it's kind of Warlock of Firetop Mountain too. Hi there, this is my original 1982 copy of Warlock of Firetop Mountain. It is laminated, is that what you call that? It's got some of that sticky plastic over it to protect it, and it is very careworn. It is an absolute classic. So let's have a flick through. At the beginning we've got instructions, we've got an adventure sheet that you can see is covered in very childish writing back from the day. A lot of dead orcs mentioned there. I can't read the other things. Dead dog it says there. And then you've got this choose your own adventure book, separated into small paragraphs, which I think was one of the keys with this book. Because, for instance, TSR, the Dungeons and Dragons people in America, were doing much longer paragraphs. It took a lot more reading than this one did. This goblin image here is one of my all-time favourite pictures. This is Russ Nicholson goblin. Russ Nicholson goblin. It's a Russ Nicholson illustration of a goblin-like. You get the idea. The first book of its kind, the first choose your own adventure book that had a kind of combat system and a dice system in it. And it's huge. It went global. Now, it's of its day. There are people who will criticise it and say, wow, if you turned left, you could win the game. But if you turned right, you died instantly and you didn't even get any hints or clues. No, absolutely. Sudden death was an element of these. But that's what you've got fingers and thumbs for. You're meant to do this. You're meant to have your fingers and thumbs in like about 30 odd pages like that, so that you don't lose where you are. You go, oh no, I just got killed by a troll. So you go back and find where you were earlier and then pretend it never happened. Other criticism, I suppose this one is really hard. There's a thing in there called the Maze of Zagor, which is, it's not just a maze, it's like a numerical maze. The way they've done the paragraphs is a maze. And in my later teens, I actually mapped it out, and I looked through this copy earlier before this video. I couldn't find the map, which I was a little bit annoyed about. But it doesn't matter whether you hate it or not. You are probably watching this video because you're part of the hobby. The hobby exists as much because of this as Lord of the Rings or any other kind of fantasy adventure or Game of Thrones or anything like that. This is key to the board gaming and fantasy gaming scene. So it's already won all its awards and plaudits and fame. It is what it is, and it's a classic. And if you've never played it, you can get it really cheap. Go and get a copy. Right. That was 1982. 1986, this was released. Steve Jackson presents. So Ian Livingstone was not involved in this one. Steve and Ian being the two key people behind the Fighting Fantasy game books, as the onward going series became known. This is a board game aimed at children. I didn't have this. I think I was like 13 or 14, so I was probably at that age where, I don't really want a board game, but I do want it, but I don't want it. Or perhaps I didn't even know about it because I was interested in other things. I'll just show you the back of the box as well. That's pretty darned cool. Okay, let's have a look at this. So taking a look inside, we've got this amazing map that is like put together like a jigsaw. It's very evocative of the original. You've got these little beautifully painted figures, except they don't come painted. I painted them, so that's me being really boastful there. We've got some tokens and tiles and bits and pieces. And basically, it's like the Warlock of Firetop Mountain. You can recognise some aspects from the map that kind of tally with the book, but it's randomised with you turning over tokens to find out what monster to fight. There's a bunch of you in the dungeon. You kind of like have this Cluedo-like experience to try and find the correct keys. in order to get into the treasure thing at the end. There's kind of a head nod to the maze as well, with some tokens at the top that can be swapped and changed about. It's all right. It's of its day, and it's got one of my least favourite mechanics of all time, which is roll the dice and move the little person. Am I really meant to believe that knight in armour here, or little barbarian fella, can move one at some points and then hurt it off really fast at another time? It just doesn't. It never made sense, that roll of dice and move that number. It's utter nonsense. But I suppose that was just how board games were until a certain point. But other than that, I mean, this is all right. I've played it with my kids when they were a bit younger, but not that much younger. They were still sort of late teens, and we had a good time. It was a Sunday afternoon. Everyone seemed to have fun. You wouldn't want to play this too often, though. The battles are just as repetitive as they were in the original Fighting Fantasy books. I would say this one's for collectors, but it is playable with younger children, and younger children will probably love it. Right, let's look at this one. Fighting Fantasy Adventures. This was originally subtitled The Warlock of Firetop Mountain and Other Stories when it was kickstarted. But they haven't added that for some reason. This is the deluxe edition. I was a Kickstarter, and it was a trouble Kickstarter, but like my son says, if your Kickstarter ever turns up, that's the result, isn't it? That means the Kickstarter worked. So this has worked, and it's a good product, which I was surprised at. By the time it arrived, I'd become quite cynical. But to be fair, it's actually okay, with a few issues. This one's currently on sale for about £30 in the UK, or even less, which is not a bad price at all. But okay, the deluxe version, you've got this gold stuff around the front there. Let's take a look inside. So inside you've got a rule book and a journal on very nice material. You've also got these adventure sheets, which I am never ever going to use because they're not really relevant to the gameplay. We've got a selection of boxes inside, and we've got one extra adventure because it's the deluxe Kickstarter. That's the Orb of Lucis. And then you go into Warlock of Firetop Mountain, then you go Island of the Lizard King, then you go Death Trap Dungeon, and then you go Forest of Doom, and then finally you do this battle thing at the end. We've also got some really nice wooden tokens. I've got a little metal coin here. But the main thing from the deluxe version that was useful was these 10-sided dice. Now, I hope people who received these understood what they were for. They are to do the life on monsters. You can use them to kind of like count down instead of having to use tokens, which would be really fiddly. Oh, that's my wife and dog come home. What if she finds out that I'm secretly doing YouTube videos in the living room? Hiya! Hello? I've played 3 of these with my son, and they're not it's nothing overly imaginative going on here. Basically, you're creating a map out of paragraphs, really. So you've got one deck of dungeon cards that you create a dungeon with, and then each dungeon you read a paragraph, what would be a paragraph in a book, off of the other deck, and in that way you have an adventure. This is a cooperative game for 4 players, so like all cooperative games you could play it solo, but go and buy the book if you're gonna play solo. The whole point of this really is to kind of play the books with your mates. I played through some of it with my son, and we had a blast, if I'm honest. Although I did say it's fairly obvious, it's kind of like turning the paragraphs into cards. Actually works really well in here. It's well implemented. It's all quite smooth, and I found the adventures rather easier than the books. Yeah, we enjoyed it. It's not perfect. There are a few real problems here. The first one, I'm going to say, which will really upset the well, it won't because they probably won't watch this video. But the publishers were a little bit kiboshed by their art bills, and I don't really like the art. It's a little bit smooth and digital. if you compare it to those Russ Nicholson images, it doesn't really have that same nostalgia evocation of the world that the original illustrations did. And also, there's this game as an example where they've really leaned heavily into those kind of like those original type illustrations. You can see it there on the castle. This is a game called Escape the Dark Castle, and if I can try and get out some of the cards, I'll show you the kind of imagery that they're doing. So, whoa, there you go. It is that kind of imitation of the original Fighting Fantasy art. And believe me, I don't think Escape the Dark Castle is that good a game. It's purely nostalgia, and the nostalgia they've gone for is really through that black and white art. But it works. They sold a lot of that Escape from Dark Castle game. So it was a little disappointing. Don't get me wrong, the art's good. It's just not quite from the originals. Okay. That was one problem. What was the other problem? Oh, replayability. Huge issue. This is not very replayable. Once you've done it, you're going to know all the secrets, all there is to know. I mean, I am going to replay it because I'm going to replay it with my grandson when he's a little bit older. I will probably play it solo as well at some point when I've had a chance to forget what's what. But for most people, this is a one and done, and it doesn't take that long. It is relatively cheap at £30, but you know, I've got the deluxe version there. The deluxe aspect really isn't needed. You're all right with a copy from the shops. Also, I think the extra characters that came with the deluxe set, really they're just skins. They don't really change very much at all about your characters, which was quite disappointing. So what I'd say is this is okay, but this is not going to change the world in the way that the original book did, and it's not going to change your life in the way other dungeon crawlers might. So, you know, no Frosthaven or Gloomhaven this. One of my favourite dungeon crawlers, I'm going to have to lean across the table to get it here, is this actually. And this is an opinion, a personal choice, but I really like tiny epic dungeons. I like the fact it's quick to set up. I like the fact it's got variability, which is so missing in so many other dungeon crawlers. Really missing in that Final Fantasy, Fighting Fantasy game we've just looked at. But this has variability. Every game you play is going to be different. There are fun, cool monsters. It's quite a nice little game, and at some point, perhaps in the future, I'll have a look at some of the other tiny epics because, hey, storage. Okay, this has been quite a short one. Go and read the Fighting Fantasy books if you haven't. If you're a collector, you might want to track this fella down. And if you want fun with your friends, not on your own, then this is going to cost you less than a meal out, and it will keep you going for enough hours to make it worth the price. I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you soon. Cheers, bye.